Well, if you've been following the news, Steve Jobs recently laid down the gauntlet to most of the music companies out there, the record companies. Get rid of digital rights management. If you ever download anything off of iTunes, the songs, they're typically encoded with copyright algorithms that prevent you from copying those songs onto other computers, so you can't share them. Well, we've got Jack Kapica on the line from globetechnology.com. And I find this quite interesting that Steve Jobs has laid this down. And I also want to talk about the levies as well. Do you think Steve Jobs will get his way?
Steve Jobs has a lot of clout, and he might. He's also got one other thing very much on his side. So far, you have to understand that most of the music industry's complaints have been based on American law, not international law. The problem with Steve Jobs is that he is applying the iTunes digital rights management system to the iPod. And the international community, specifically the European Union, says that he should open it up to other people's products. In other words, if you bought your MP3s from some other source, they should be able to play on the iPod as well. And this is a very powerful lobby, meaning the European Union, and they can easily outvote the Americans. They're giving Microsoft a much harder time than the Americans did, for instance. So I can easily see them turning around and slapping Jobs with that. And Jobs doesn't want it either. So I mean, the problem is one of technology here. There's no specific way in which any one person can handle digital rights management in the digital era.
Well, it sounds interesting. I mean, his argument basically is that they'll sell more music.
Yeah.
Because people will be able to share it more freely and buy it more.
What you're dealing with, what you're dealing with in the music industry is a whole bunch of people who are basically businessmen. They're neither musicians nor are they technologists. They were the last people in the world to adopt any kind of technology. I think back in 2004, I heard a statistic saying that not one of the big music labels had a chief technology officer on board. What they did, however, have was an awful lot of lawyers who knew what to do, and lawyers do what lawyers do, which is sue the pants off everybody. In this case, their own clients, their customers.
Well, it's let's take it down to Canada now, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but if you have bought any recordable media, including like blank CDs, blank DVDs over the past few years, there's actually a levy attached to that as well, and that's going towards an organization called the Canadian Private Copying Collective. Is that right?
That's right. And they get all this money from all the sales of, well, things like CDs and DVDs, and disperse it to the artists that they represent. Now, there's a problem with this. Oh God, there's so many problems that I can't even begin to enumerate them all. But the main one is that what they're doing now, again, like what they're doing with iTunes and so on, is that they're insisting that it's not up to them. The music industry is not up to them to police use of it. It's up to the stores, in this case, to collect the money for them and send it back to the CPCC, and then to disperse it to the individual artists. Now, the other major problem with this is, of course, that it covers not only music. So in other words, if you buy CDs, DVDs, and whatever, recordable media like that, hard disks, then what you might be doing with it is like, doing backups on your computer data or whatever. But as far as the music industry is concerned, you're only buying them for one thing, and that's to put music on it. And if you do that, then of course you're doing it illegally, therefore you have to give them money.
Well, that's not really fair, because a lot of people do use blank CDs and DVDs for backups and
well, exactly.
movies.
See,
and that type of thing.
But then what happens is that they do have a mechanism, and this one's hilarious. They do have a mechanism for exempting you from having to pay that levy. You have to go and register with the CPCC and then have some sort of a card or a number which you can present to your local Harry's Computer Parts galore and say, look, I don't have to pay the levy on this CD, so therefore you have to charge me a lower price. Can you imagine any other industry having a situation like that where you have to actually go hat in hand to the industry and say, can you give me an exemption from your levy?
Who's going to go out and actually register?
Well, I mean, there's a mechanism by which you do. You go to the CPCC website, and they'll point you on how to get yourself registered. You have to prove to them, of course, that you're a legitimate business, that you're not using this in order to rip off the latest Nelly Furtado hit, and so on and so forth. And of course, needless to say, they'll probably check up on you, make sure you're not lying. It's insane. I've never seen anything like it.
They want a levy on iPods and MP3 players now as well. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, that's going to be hilarious too, because the biggest iPods are going to rise in price by about $75. This is according to a request that they're putting into the Copyright Board of Canada. The Copyright Board decides who gets what and how much. The CPCC just collects the money and then disburses it. The interesting thing here is that if you want to go off and buy an iPod, suddenly it's going to cost you $75 more if this proposal goes through. Can you imagine how Steve Jobs is going to take, what kind of an attitude he's going to take about that? It's going to put the iPod $75 more expensive than before, which means it'll be way more expensive than any other MP3 player on the market. And he certainly doesn't want to have to lose his competitive edge, does he?
No. Is there anything consumers can do about this?
Well, we can elect a new government, I suppose. Well, we did that last time, and that didn't do any good.
Yeah, I don't think the government wants to weigh in on this, do they?
No, I can't see them doing it. There's been rumors that the government is going to come up with a new copyright law. And I don't see any way in which the law can be framed today in a way that will be satisfactory to everybody. Now, let me say right off the top, I support supporting artists and giving them the money that they're due. I have serious concerns about how much of each sale the artist gets and how much the industry gets in return. They're getting the same amount of money they did when they had to press the discs on what I called licorice pizzas, and distribution and putting in stores and so on and so forth. But with digital download, all that's gone, and it's cheaper now. So, I mean, all that money now is gravy. But that's another issue. Anyhow, what will happen, though, of course, you see, is that if they come in and say, yes, there has to be a levy, the Conservatives will do one thing that's terrible, which is that they're going to suddenly introduce regulation when they've promised everybody that what they're going to do is deregulate the government. There's too many regulations. That's a Conservative credo. And if they bring in heavier regulation, they're going to be basically going back on their own philosophy. If, however, they take off the regulation and let the prices stay low, then what's going to happen is that they're going to upset their biggest supporters, namely big industry. So you go figure what they're going to do. I have no idea.
It doesn't look like anyone wins out of that. Well, Jack, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
That was Jack Kapica from theglobetechnology.com. You can check out all his articles and his blog up there. He's got some great writing.